Hey, what's going on? Arden Zwelling and Ben Nicholson-Smith here with instant analysis of the Toronto Blue Jays acquisition of Taijuan Walker from the Seattle Mariners. Ben, we just got off of a Zoom call with Blue Jays GM Ross Atkins, who obviously was very excited to be adding an athlete of Walker's caliber to his pitching staff and his rotation going forward as the Blue Jays try to qualify for the MLB postseason. But I actually want to start off the field here because Atkins also spoke a bit about Walker's character and what he has learned about him from players and coaches and front office personnel in Seattle. And what we learned this morning through the reporting of Jeff Passan was that Taijuan Walker was actually one of the strongest advocates in the Seattle Mariners clubhouse for not playing on Wednesday night, for joining the demonstrations and protests that we saw across North American professional sports on Wednesday night against racial injustice and against the shooting of Jacob Blake, obviously. And, is very strong in the NBA and starting with the Milwaukee Bucks. And that has resonated throughout now sports across the continent. So, I am just curious, what do you think it says about Taijuan Walker that, he was standing up so strongly for that and that he was so willing to take the stand and to demonstrate in response to what is happening in America right now?
Well, it does tell you that he's looking at the big picture. And this is a time in our society, in our lives, that we should be looking at the big picture. It's not a time to just hide ourselves and bury ourselves in the minutia. And, I'm someone who loves transactions as much as anyone. And I'll debate whether Kevin Biggio should be hitting eighth or first. And normally, we all love that kind of stuff, but this isn't the time for that. This is the time to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter. This is the time to acknowledge that there are just more important issues. And so the teams like the Seattle Mariners that decided to step aside and just cede the stage to others was really a powerful statement across different leagues, historic, really. And Taijuan Walker was a part of that in his own way. Now he's joining the Blue Jays, and they're a team that's discussing their own ways to acknowledge these issues and injustices and the systemic racism that exists in our world. But it is telling about Walker that he would be a part of that process.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. And that's obviously where the attention needs to be right now. And that's why we're seeing these demonstrations because, sports shouldn't be a distraction at this time when there are obvious inequalities in our society. And, there are obvious injustices being committed upon Black men and women, not only in the United States, but Canada as well, every day, and it can't be swept under the rug. It has to be at the forefront of what we are discussing. So I think it says a lot about Taijuan Walker that he would say, yeah, no, I'm not going to compete tonight. I'm not going to, I'm going to risk like my livelihood and my profession and my paycheck in order to stand up for those who don't enjoy the same privileges that I do. So, I think it's going to be a tremendous benefit on the Blue Jays clubhouse that after the designation for assignment of Anthony Alford didn't have an African-American in it. An African-American representation is already so minimal across MLB. We're talking about around 8% of the league, and it's, certainly not higher in front offices or on coaching staffs. So, it can be a really isolating thing to be a Black player in MLB, and Anthony Alford actually spoke about that quite eloquently when we talked to him then, when he was actually on the Blue Jays 25-man roster and talking about, how difficult it can be to step up and take a stand when things like this are happening. But, one thing we've seen from these Blue Jays, whether it's Kevin Biggio or Rowdy Tellez's comments last night, I know you were on the Zoom call as well, there are other individuals in this clubhouse who are interested in taking up this cause and in taking a stand and letting their voices be heard. So I think that, having Taijuan Walker around to learn from and to, support, in his demonstrations, like I think it could only be a benefit for those individuals as well.
Absolutely. It's like any workplace, diversity is important. And in this instance, you think about a guy like Anthony Alford, who's obviously become friends with Rowdy Tellez and Kevin Biggio and many, many others in that clubhouse, and he's made an impact. You can look up the comments on sportsnet.ca from Rowdy Tellez and the kind of impact that Anthony Alford has had on him. And it's just, it becomes more personal for a player like Tellez, who himself does not experience that form of racism, but who can relate and who can empathize with someone like Anthony Alford, who has certainly faced more than his share.
On the field, purely on the field, when we're talking about Taijuan Walker, as a pitcher on the mound, we've seen a guy who's kind of battled some injuries over his time in MLB. He's had these, flashes of brilliance, and obviously the stuff is there, right? Like you look at a fastball that can be 93 to 95. You think about a pretty effective curveball and a slider, or a cutter when he wants to throw it a bit harder, but two effective breaking weapons, and then a changeup as well. I mean, that's a pretty complete, well-rounded arsenal, but we just haven't seen Taijuan Walker pitch all that much over the last few seasons, have we?
No, yeah, that's for sure. He hasn't been logging those 200 inning seasons, but it's funny in a year like this, where obviously no one is going to log that many innings. Really, the Jays just need 4 or 5 starts from him. That would get them to the end of the year, and you always have to compare it against what was the alternative. And in this case, Walker's a good pitcher. He's someone who's has a track record of being a good pitcher. He's having a good season now. And the alternative was a bullpen day. The Jays right now have 2 open spots in their rotation. They need to fill those. And so to find a capable starter like Walker is a clear upgrade. They're not giving up a ton. It's a player to be named later in cash. That's a reasonable cost to pay. It does not cut them out from other opportunities on the pitching market or anywhere else in the trade market. So they have a lot of positives here for this one. I don't see a lot of negatives. I mean, it's certainly not, look, we're not talking about David Price over Felix Doubront here when it comes to upgrades in the rotation. Like, let's not overstate the impact that Taijuan Walker might have, but he's still a good player, and you need good players to win and to compete. So that makes sense for the Jays.
And to me, the biggest thing is he's been pitching well this year, which is obviously such a strange season, and every player is reacting to it differently. So this is somebody who has been thriving in this environment. So I think that's important. It's also important that Taijuan Walker has thrown 2 outings of 7 innings, and he has been up over 100 pitches in an outing this year. No Blue Jays starter has thrown 7 innings this year. No Blue Jays starter has been up over 100 pitches this year. So for a club then that has just been piecing things together with its bullpen over the last little bit, and is currently in this insane stretch of, I think it's 28 games in 27 days, having somebody who can give them some length and give them a deep outing, perhaps as soon as Friday or Saturday, like perhaps as soon as this weekend, because he hasn't pitched in the last few days. So if he gets through that intake process quickly, he could be on the mound very, very fast. I think that's going to be really important for Charlie Montoyo as he tries to navigate these few weeks.
Oh, that's right. I mean, you think, reading between the lines a little bit, I think the Jays want him to start Friday when they have that opening. They're getting him on a private plane to get here, or I shouldn't say here, to get to Buffalo, where the Blue Jays are playing. And, that's with the view toward getting him active as soon as possible. They obviously need help. And Walker's rested too. He hasn't pitched since, I think it's August 19th. So he's going to be fully rested, and he can finally give a little bit of rest to a pitching staff that's been very heavily taxed.
Do you expect the Blue Jays to continue being active in the trade market? I mean, I think we know that they will try, but do you expect that more deals are going to be consummated as we get towards Monday?
I do think so. I think that, first of all, they have some room for improvement, right? We watched this team. It's not a perfect team. They could use a bench upgrade over Joe Panik or Brandon Drury. They could use another starting pitcher. I mean, and not only for this year, but if you look at this as almost, starting the offseason shopping early a little bit, then you're able to add someone who can help you now down the stretch, potentially into the playoffs, which kind of weird to say, but the Jays should be making the playoffs. They should be thinking about the playoffs as they're over 500 at the midway point of a shortened season. That should be on their radar. And so you can have someone who helps you now, and then potentially if they can acquire someone controllable, then that player helps them going forward. They have the farm system to do it. That's a big difference compared to 4 years ago, which is the last time they were buying in the summertime. And so that should open up a lot of doors for them.
Yeah, they have the flexibility to do a lot of different things, right? Because as you mentioned, Ross Atkins said in the Zoom call that we just had with them, they can be in on every player because they have such prospect depth, right? So they clearly, look, there were going to be plenty of teams that were interested in acquiring Taijuan Walker, and clearly the Blue Jays outbid them with whatever the stipulations of the player to be named later are. I would assume that Seattle had a few clubs interested, and the Blue Jays clearly won that. So they had the prospect capital to win that bidding. That's something that they can continue to do going forward. Another thing they have is financial flexibility. In adding Taijuan Walker, this is a guy who was on a 1-year, $2 million deal. So you prorate that down to a 60-game season. That's like $750K, somewhere around there. And we're already half through the year. So we're really like looking at, I don't know, $350, $375K the Blue Jays are taking on in terms of payroll. It's really not much. So the Blue Jays should still have the ability to take on money from other clubs if they want to, and if ownership approves it, and if it's a deal that makes sense for them, particularly as you alluded to, if they're acquiring term and if it's somebody who is going to help them not just in 2020's rental, but in 2021 and perhaps even 2022, when you think about some of the younger, more controllable pitchers or even position players who might be available. That's why I think that the Blue Jays are going to continue to be active in the coming days through to Monday, is because they just have so much flexibility and they can get a lot more creative than maybe some of their competitors can at this point.
That's right. I mean, no guarantees, but you look at this team has a need for help. They have the means to get help. They have the time to do it. Ross Atkins says the phone is basically going off nonstop. So that adds up to a pretty good climate for making further moves. Whether it happens or not, I don't know, but I would guess that the Blue Jays make another trade or two before Monday.
That's Ben Nicholson-Smith. I'm Arden Zwelling. You can catch us on @TheLetters at sportsnet.ca. We'll talk to you next time.